Hello, everybody. My name's Jeff Soriano, and I'm the head of marketing here at UVisit. I want to thank you for joining today's expert panel series, where we're going to be focusing on the evolving application funnel and really talking about how it's become a 12-month recruitment cycle, so 12 months of strategy. Before we jump in, just want to walk through a couple of housekeeping items. So today's webinar is recorded. So we'll be sending out a live recording afterwards in the next couple of days. So don't worry if you guys need to jump off for any reason, anything comes up, we will send you guys that recorded version. So don't worry about it. Again, just to reiterate, we're very excited about today's topic, the evolution of the application funnel. And as part of our expert series, we're really working hard to make sure that we're fostering this community of folks in admissions and recruitment and marketing within higher ed. So when we determine these topics, we actually work with our panelists. So we did work with Logan West from Fordham College to determine what would be the most impactful topic for you guys today in the higher ed community. In addition to our expert Q&A, we will be doing an audience Q&A. For any of you folks that do have questions, there is a questions panel on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to enter them in. We will do our best to get to all of them. But again, feel free to ask questions, guys. We do want to make this collaborative as well. Great, perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about the new funnel, because the funnel's really changed quite a bit. We saw this tweet recently. It was in an Inside Higher Ed article, and it really resonated with us because we all just kind of got past May 1st, and there was a time where like this was the date, and now it's a date and really more of a milestone that is indicating what we're going to do next. And as you can see by this photo, the new funnel is a bit chaotic. There's not necessarily a very clear starting point or end point, and the student journey has become increasingly unpredictable. And this unpredictableness has really led to the number of touch points that we need to drive these prospective students down the funnel to eventually become enrolled and attend classes in fall. So it really is a whole new kind of funnel that we need to approach very differently. So of course, it kind of begs the question, well, what's caused this change? What has made this evolve? And you guys are aware of a lot of these points. You folks know a lot of them, so I'm not going to sit here and read them all, but I do want to touch on the points which have the highest impact. I'd say that for us, we're seeing increased competition and more access to information as being things that have really driven this evolution. So it's changed the way that we recruit, but we need to change the way that we provide information. We need to be thinking about how we provide that information. And a great point from our first expert series, and if you guys didn't see that one, it's available on our website if you want to give it a look. What we did hear someone say is that every institution is great. And it's really true. Every institution is great, and it's great in its own unique ways. So you folks need to build the strategies and the content that's going to allow you guys to differentiate and really show what makes you great, because you are great. And you need to make sure that you're aligning your recruitment programs so that students can find the institution that's best aligned to their personal and educational aspirations. So how do you do this? Well, your website is ultimately your most valuable digital resource. You've already got programs that you're running. You've got them in motion across different channels, whether it's email or social, texting. You're physically going to meet with folks in doing fairs, whatever it might be. You have all these things in motion, but they're driving people back to your website. So what we say is use these channels to kind of be the first sentence in your story. But if you're embedding links back into these channels, drive them back to your website so that you guys are actually able to tell the whole story. So to provide a little bit more clarity, here's an example. Um, you might be advertising online, and you might be going after a very specific cohort of students, maybe based on academic programs. So here we have like a media and communications program. This, very specific and relevant ad, there's no question, it's definitely going to drive and increase those click-through rates, but it's what you're going to show them on the website that's ultimately going to increase your conversion rates. And it's those conversion rates that are going to move people down the funnel. So for example, here, like maybe you're going from awareness to inquiry. So great, your ads are super relevant. They're super personalized because it's not one size fits all. But that means that the content on your site needs to be not just one size fits all. And as we said before, the way that people are getting information has changed. So you need to show them a lot more. Another example, a lot of folks know that, social media is a great channel to use. Students are constantly on it. So maybe you're using this to run ads or maybe even organically get in front of the students. It's a great way to generate that awareness, but, have your ads grab their attention. So here's an example of maybe, you're showing some students on Instagram and you have a CTA of come inside. Let them go inside the dorm room. Let them explore. Let them even potentially see, like, what do I need to bring when I come and attend your institution? Just give them that information that they really want that's going to help them make that educated decision. I think a lot of us are focused on physical visits. We've seen that a lot of physical visits are actually happening after students are getting admitted. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop driving to try to get those students to physically visit before as well. But here's an example of where maybe you're sending out text messages, and I know you're sending texts to get them there, but what if you're also sending texts afterwards? So you're giving that additional touch point. And again, like in this particular case, we're sending a text. It's like, hey, Sam, it was great having you on campus last week. We noticed your interest in our biology program and thought you'd like to check out our cool science center. If you guys are linking back to your website where someone can go inside the science center, they can see inside, they can experience what it's like to take a class. You're really giving them that information that they're looking for that's going to allow them to understand if your institution is aligned to their personal and educational aspirations. And that, what we see, is being extremely important. So no matter what channel you're driving students from, you're driving them back to your website. And what the UVisit platform does is it transforms traditional content into this super content. So whether you have photos on Instagram, 360s on Facebook, videos on YouTube, it's the ability to weave them all together into this new kind of super content that's going to allow you to tell your story. It's going to allow you to differentiate, and it's going to allow you to show more, which is going to allow you to tackle these challenges as it relates to the evolving application funnel. So enough from me. I'm sure you guys have heard enough. You want to jump into the exciting part, and so do I. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Logan West. Logan, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I guess I've been working in the education space for about the last just over 5 years. I began my career as a web manager and multimedia designer for the University of Minnesota Duluth, overseeing website content and any graphic design resource that the specific college that I was working at needed, and really diving into SEO and understanding how users were getting to our website and make sure we were optimizing in a way that felt natural and we were serving the content that our users expected. And then I decided to leave higher ed for a short while and go to the K through 12 space. And I worked as a marketing manager in the charter network space. And I strategized directly with the CEO and founder to really raise awareness of the network that was situated in Harlem, New York, and make sure that the students in that area were aware of the progressive education models that our schools were serving the community, and really drive the creative development for the different charter networks based off where they were in Harlem and the populations that we're working with. And then I left that position and I've been the assistant director of marketing at Fordham for the last 3 years, working with my graphic design team and our editorial staff and other assistant directors of marketing to make sure that we have cohesive brand across the institution, especially when we're talking to our external audiences. And then under direction with our AVP for marketing, really moving the brand in a way that feels young and while not also, and I guess more natural in the sense that we wanted to speak about the core values of our institution, but in a way that felt more relevant to our new audiences.
I think you all can see why we've asked Logan to participate. That's an awesome background, and I appreciate you giving us a little bit more color there. Again, I mentioned everybody that Logan and I had actually spoken beforehand and really started to talk about this topic and why it really became of interest. So, Logan, I kind of gave my 2 cents about what has caused the evolution of this funnel, but it'd be really great if maybe you could give your perspective on what has started to cause this evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking to an audience that's digitally savvy, they don't even know that the save button is a floppy disk, and that's how I saved my progress on Oregon Trail in my computer lab in elementary school. They don't even know what Oregon Trail is. So I think you have to understand that you're working with a group of people that are digital natives, right? They are constantly on their phone in a way that like millennials weren't. And by making sure that you're serving content consistently throughout the year, you're able to make sure that you're expanding your reach. But that being said, like there's some factors that go into this. Like for us in the Northeast, Fordham University is situated in New York City. We need to reach out to distance markets due to a lack of students that are in the high school space in the Northeast. There's a surplus in the Southwest, but there's fewer and fewer students that are out here. So how do we expand our reach? How do we show students that there's unique opportunities for them? And New York City can be accessible and not scary. And it's easier for students to also apply to more than one school at once. Like the Common App was relevant when I was going to college, but it wasn't something that every school had adopted. So now you can apply to multiple schools at once, throw down your deposits, and then kind of step away versus filling out 12 different applications for 12 different schools. So everything is becoming easier. So you want to make sure that your school's information is becoming easier to obtain. So by expanding the application or basically your brand and your marketing campaigns throughout the year, you're able to target students based off where they are in this new complex funnel that makes sense and is relevant for them based off what stage they're in, whether they're sophomores and juniors or seniors or even their parents.
No, I mean, it's a super good point, the digital native aspect of it. The fact that, again, the Common App, mass adoption at this point, the ease of use, as well as ease of information. So, when you guys start to think about the information you're providing and talking about the core values of Fordham, is it always based on the school? Are you talking about student values? Like, how are you guys starting to incorporate some of that into your storyline?
Well, I think the unique part of Fordham is we're a Jesuit institution and people understand, like a lot of the students that we reach are familiar with the mission. But for those who aren't, it's unpacking this traditional education, like the traditional values that we have in a way that doesn't feel intimidating. So you want to show students that a religious school can still have progressive ideals, which is something that the Jesuits are known for. So it's a fun way to unpack that and make more people aware of the unique opportunities that a school like ours has to offer.
And what about, first of all, thank you. That was great clarifying points. When you start to think about that in the recruitment funnel, again, Common App being important as it relates to the students who are currently in that kind of application mode. But what about these younger students? You mentioned obviously having to go out of state to hit a larger audience. Are you guys starting to go younger? Is that a trend that you're very much focused on?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to go younger. You're going to want to set up your marketing campaign so that things are moving in parallel. So you're going to be setting out brand awareness. You're going to be speaking to prospective parents. You're going to be speaking to the senior class. I mean, all of these things are all being launched at the same time, and you want to make sure the content that you're serving those unique audiences, depending on whether it's their age or
Right.
where they're at in your funnel, is relevant to their experience. So a sophomore isn't going to need to know that the application's due on May 1st. They're going to need to know, oh, I'm situated in New York City and here's some cool opportunities that we have to offer. Or if you're a school in Iowa, like here's some unique programs that we have to offer and we're just in your backyard. Come take a look at us this weekend. I mean, you want to make sure that you're filtering the content in a way that feels relevant for those users.
It makes sense because obviously, again, as discussed, and really you made this point, it's not one size fits all. So having the
Right.
program enabled for the different parts of the funnel as it relates to their interests is extremely important.
And I
So
think the hardest part, just sorry, one more clarification, is when
go
we
ahead.
work in higher ed, we don't have a ton of people working on all these things. Like it's a lot of work to think about segmenting your content for each individual audience. But I think it really takes, you have to take time and look at your own school and your own institution and realize where do we want to grow so that, and that might help you kind of build that out for yourself because it is not one size fits all. Everybody has their own unique needs. Everybody has their own unique interests and their own goals of what they want to see how they want their institution to grow. So allocating the resources that you do have in a way that makes sense for you is going to be your ultimate, like that's what you need to focus on because we don't all have staffs of like 70 plus people. We definitely don't. And so you have to be nimble in a way that like, and tackle little bit by little bit to see how you can diversify what you did in years past to show improvement for the future.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and kind of to that point, looking at what you've done, things in the past, determining if they're still working or if you have to try different things. One of the questions that we get on a pretty frequent basis is really around like, well, have all my tactics changed? Do I have to completely revamp the whole thing? Am I using traditional tactics? How are we doing this? What are you thinking about the kind of mix of, because you said digitally savvy, but like, what's the mix of traditional to digital, and how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think print is dead. I think there's a unique opportunity to do beautiful print well and be strategic about how you're going to do that. Because, of course, you're going to get a bigger bang for your buck digitally, but everybody's going digital. So be mindful and strategic about how you're deploying your print pieces because if you want, there's ways for you to measure impact with print by giving unique URLs and moving and judging the analytics on the back end so that when you do deploy a print piece, you can see how much traction you got via clicks or however you want it, or whether it's actual people who showed up for the event or who showed up for tours, like however you want to judge if the piece was a success is going to be on you. But there are ways to judge the success of a print piece. And the nice thing is print is stationary, so you can design a piece, whether it's for the parents or for the students, or if it's like a unique piece that's going to go out to a younger audience, like that's going to sit at home, right? An ad is going to eventually go away, and unless you're serving it multiple times to the audience, then you're potentially getting more awareness. But the unique piece about having intentional print is that it sits at home and it becomes a conversation piece. And that's where you can have a lot of leverage. So I don't think you have to necessarily revamp your entire process, but just be intentional. Like, what is the point of this piece? And like, is it worth X dollars? And what is the potential return on that piece if it works? And if it's going to work and you're going to see a good return on it, then I think it's worth it.
I no, I mean, and I agree. Like, to your point, it's print isn't dead, and I think that it's your ability to break through some of the noise, especially the digital noise that one might see, as people are getting very used to just kind of scrolling past advertisements because they're not feeling authentic or they're not relevant. So as you guys start to think about these print pieces, and then ultimately, you mentioned whether you're creating a unique landing page to support it, I kind of mentioned this concept in the beginning, but it's like kind of the first sentence of the story, and then the web is kind of telling the whole story. As you guys think of these print pieces, are they that kind of like touch point that piques interest and drives people to the next stage? Are you thinking them specifically about a specific stage, or is it more about creating relevant print for stages? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination. I think there's like the unique pieces that we all do, like a view book, right? That's a really great piece that can be extremely in-depth that every school does, and everybody's looks very different. And if it's not been designed well, it starts to people will see that. And if it is designed well, then like it people like, oh wow, like there's like a unique story here. I don't know. I think it piques more interest. That being said, like or depending on what part of the funnel you're in, if you have potentially a pain point in the funnel, like it's a great idea to include another additional element, and the print could be the answer. And I think for every school that we all suffer in one part of the funnel or the other. And I think like for us, when we think about when we want to introduce a piece, we think about where do we want to grow, and if is that piece going to be a print or digital in terms of that portion of the funnel. So I think you have to kind of come at it from both sides. Like there's going to be the unique things that we all have, and most people have a view book or at least a travel piece that goes with counselors for a takeaway, or there's the point pieces that you develop not necessarily off the hand, but you're like, you know what, there's like a unique problem that we want to solve right now, and like how do we do a final push, and maybe the answer is print and maybe it's digital. So you just have to kind of weigh out what's going to work for you and your budget.
Yeah, and so to kind of keep going on the topic, but related back to your statement, like you don't all have the biggest teams. You kind of got to be nimble. You got to work with what you have. But recognizing you have all these different cohorts of students at different stages and all these different things, is content and repurposing content and reusing content and leveraging content, is that how you guys are looking at scaling this? Is it creepy? Like, how are you thinking about scaling this?
Yeah, I mean, we love repurposing great content. We put together stories that are coming out through the entire year, and content marketing is such a unique way to highlight your school in a way that doesn't feel like here's another ad. It's like here's something unique that's happening at our institution. Like we're all great schools. To that point you brought up earlier, we all have unique things that are happening. And so I think by taking pieces that your news team or your editorial team have put together and repurposing them, you're able to give those pieces another life by introducing them in a way that feels like that you've actually been able to impact a certain portion of the funnel or with a certain audience that's going to resonate with that content so that it feels unique to them during that point as well. So you can be strategic in repurposing what you've already created.
And it's really about like, okay, yes, the content's the same, but how you're positioning it to the audience is ultimately different and allows them to
Right. And
that relevance.
exactly. And like we've created pieces before that weren't quite right, but there was like something good at its core. So you take that piece and it's already been 70% of the work has been done. And how do you do it and how do you revamp it in a way that feels like a little bit more intentional for that time of year, and then relaunch it specifically for a digital campaign per se.
No, 100%. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people putting out, videos of graduations, and that's potentially a great way to get the students who might be melting over the summer to be like, you know what? Here's a video of graduation. Don't you want to see yourself walk across that stage?
Yeah.
So yeah, totally get it. That makes a lot of sense.
That emotional resonance that gets people, and you have a high return when people really feel like they can see themselves or like it's going to yield an emotional response. I mean, that's the thing that we're always after, right? Where you want to make sure that anybody who might not even be familiar with your institution now all of a sudden feels connected, and then you repurpose it in a way that feels intentional. So
Yeah.
scale it as much as you can. It's
No,
gonna only prove beneficial.
I think it's the name of the game, right? Because when you create, to your point, I think it's a really relevant point. Like you might create a piece of content and it might not have been perfect, but I don't know how many of us marketers and folks in admission enrollment have ever created something perfect, but it's definitely something that you can be reusing for those different cohorts of students. Makes
Totally.
in going back and looking at it, you talked about something before, and we've gotten some questions that are really around measuring success. You mentioned like if you have a direct mail piece and you're driving people back to a landing page, how are you guys ultimately measuring the success of that? What are some of the ways that you're tracking it, but also what are you gauging as success?
Sure. So I guess like for one thing that we like to measure is bodies on campus in a way where you're getting people from distance markets to the institution to see are they visiting this year? That's one way we like to look to see if some of our efforts have been successful. You also want to, which I think a lot of people want, right? You want to see prospective students and their parents coming and being intrigued by what you've already sent them. It also is just general, and then if it's a unique URL, we want to know how much traffic's going there. So just clicks, like where are people clicking, what are they doing? If it's a specific page built for that, there might be unique goals on that page that we're setting, and having pixels fire when the action is completed, and understanding based off of this market that was sent that unique URL, these are the amount of clicks, these are the amount of actions, and based off the pixels firing, did that, like, was that piece successful? And like having your own internal metrics to kind of gauge whether or not that was a good thing to do or not. And if
Awesome.
it wasn't, then asking why, like, why did this not work? And was
Exactly.
it introduced in the wrong time, or did like something happen at the mail center? Like, I mean, a thousand things can go wrong with mail. So like that's the other hard part about relying on print. But also just being intentional with it, I think you're gonna set yourself up.
Yeah. And just for reference, I am my questions are now actually the audience questions. So that last one was based off somebody asking how you measure success. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time because we do have 2 minutes left, and I promised everybody that we would do a 30-minute webinar. So I'm going to look at one last question here, and it was actually kind of just related to tag on to what you just said around the unique landing pages. It was around, are you creating landing pages for these campaigns? So I guess the question is, are you driving people back to the website, or are you creating unique pages for the campaigns?
That
Hopefully,
depends on the campaign. You have to decide what your goals are. I think for Boredom, when we are launching a new campaign, it depends on what the campaign is. I mean, we're not only talking to prospective students, we're talking to alums, we're talking to donors, you're talking to, like it depends on the audience. So you just have to, really decide on what audience you're trying to reach, and do you already have web content that fulfills the need for that audience? And if you don't, then that warrants a new page. But if you feel like you have something that you could drive them to that would be successful, then repurpose what you have. I had a supervisor once who told me he always reminded us to work smarter, not harder. And I feel like those have been golden words for my career, in a way that, like, how can you scale this? How can you be intentional? You've already done the work, but what you've done already, like, been, is that going to be is that going to allow for everyone to be successful? And if not, then how do you work with what you have and make it work? So sometimes you just have to do that, and that's all right. It's better than nothing.
no, absolutely. I'm going to get to one last question because I do want to be respectful of time. And again, I'll ask the question, but and I don't know what level of detail you'll go into, but it was, can you give a specific example of a campaign and best practices for that campaign? I know it's a little bit of a wide question.
Yeah.
So maybe perhaps a campaign that you've run recently that you thought went very well, and what you think from perhaps an operational perspective you thought helped drive that excellence, or what content helped drive its excellence?
Yeah, I think a unique campaign that we ran was specifically engaging with parents and serving them unique content that was unique for them. Your parents want to be engaged with your university. They want a relationship with your university because higher ed is now at a price point where it's a family decision. So really working with that audience and serving them content that feels relevant for them. It's not necessarily going to be the same content that you serve for your younger audience and your prospective students. It's going to their prospective parents. They have different questions, they have different needs. So serving them content during the same time you're serving your student content, because generally mom and dad might be like, I saw this ad for this university, it looks really cool, we should go. And they're going to bring their student, their child with them out the door because they own the car, they all pay for the gas, they're going to bring them. So talk to them in a way that feels intentional for them, because that is like an untapped market that I think a lot of people could benefit utilizing. Is don't serve them the same content you're serving your students, because they're going to want to hear from you in a very different way, because they've never been to university or they have. And so depending on the types of parents that are unique to your school's audience might that's going to really, I guess, notify like what you want to do with them. But really talking to them in a way that feels intentional, I think, is probably my best advice, because that's something that we're excited that we've been doing, that we've really liked the results from, and I think you could benefit too. So when would you talk to them? How would you talk to them? And figure out a plan specific for them.
Got it. Well, folks, we have run 2 minutes over. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you for joining us. And Logan, I want a special thank you for participating today, not only in our expert Q&A, but helping us to determine the topic. As always, we look to make these as relevant as possible to the community. So thank you, Logan. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course.
And thank you everybody who joined us today. Again, we will be sending out an on-demand, so look for it. If you have questions or want any information, you folks can come visit us at uvisit.com. And we look forward to talking to you and seeing you at our next one. Thank you, everybody.